being cheated on can be an incredibly brutal thing. And I know because I've gone through it. It happened to me when I was about 20 years old, I think. And it was the first time I had ever really fallen in love and being able to like experience that mutually. And yeah, I had fallen in love with a young woman and it was reciprocated. And that experience of like opening myself with reckless abandon to this beautiful person and being able to like really explore that, it was life changing. It felt like some kind of altering experience on some deep emotional or spiritual level. I remember after spending a few days with her, I spontaneously, after a life of not being able to whistle and wanting to whistle, I always loved the idea of being able to whistle and I just couldn't. I was walking down the street after spending a few days with this young woman I was falling in love with. And I was so filled with love. I was so filled with excitement at what I was going through. And I just spontaneously started whistling on the sidewalk, like a songbird, all filled up with love. All of a sudden, I had that ability. And it felt like, I remember it felt like life had just grown some new colors. It's like, oh my God, life is alive now. Everything's more vibrant. I feel more alive. I can't believe I can actually experience this feeling of love on earth. And that was, man, that was a gift to experience that because I feel like it actually did wake something up in me that I've kind of carried through the rest of my life. It's a huge gift. But I was so young and I had emotional baggage that I had no idea I had. And there was so much passion and intensity that came along with this love and this relationship, and so many feelings of attachment that came along for this woman who became my girlfriend, that it was probably destined to crash upon a rocky shore relatively quickly, which is exactly what happened. And the way that happened, I think, is in part because our lives were kind of going in different directions. We were both so young, we were figuring out who we were, and I was carving a pretty unusual path. I built a shack in the woods with my best friend and started living out there, and she had other dreams, other hopes and aspirations, and that was pulling us apart. Very normal thing to happen. And I think I didn't know how to talk about that. It made me feel really sad, and that mutated into a kind of frustration and angst and probably some judgmentalness and just probably being not the funnest guy to be around. And I remember at some point she was traveling and we were communicating via email. And she mentioned this guy that she had become friends with and that she was visiting. And I think in my mind, it felt very clean and just like a friend, because that, she was even talking openly to me about this guy. And yet there must have been some wheels that started turning. And a couple days after, she wrote me telling me what she was up to, hanging out with this guy, I was walking through the forest near the little shack where I lived with my friend at the time, and I had this feeling. It was like my heart just suddenly broke, or I had this twisting sensation in my gut, and it was like the world that I had been living in just like collapsed, and it felt like that relationship was just over. And I couldn't explain it. I didn't know, like, rationally, nothing had happened. We hadn't broken up. There was no sign that we were going to. We were still as excited and passionate about each other as ever. And yet, internally, no, the relationship had just ended. My heart was broken and I was stricken with grief, as though we had just had a breakup conversation and she had told me she cheated on me with that guy. And I remember just this sadness overwhelming me. And it just felt so devastating and crushing. And I walked back to that shack that I shared with my friend and my younger brother who was staying with us at the time. And I told them about what I was feeling, what I was going through, and what I thought it all meant. And I remember them being very loving and supportive. And over the following days, I basically like grieved that relationship and was in a state of mourning and loss, as though I knew something had happened and it was over. And when I eventually talked to my girlfriend, she told me nothing had happened. And I think over the coming weeks, I probably asked her a number of times, and she was like, no, nothing happened. She reassured me. And regardless of that, I think that was probably something did shift for me. And I grieved as though I had been cheated on. And the relationship carried on for a little bit longer, but we did go our separate ways. And then a year or two later, she wrote me and let me know that, hey, I feel really bad. I think I need to tell you something did happen between me and that guy, which was, I guess, a validation of the intuitive hunch I had felt at the time. And it was like, oh, that did happen. That's why I felt it. It felt like one of the most disorienting, painful things I've felt. Felt like my heart got torn out and the world got like punctured and went flat. And I was just remembering that experience over the past couple weeks because I had a conversation with a friend. We were talking about someone we knew who had been cheated on, and I was just like, really? That sucks. They have to feel that pain. It's so pointless. Why do people do this to each other? It's just such a difficult and brutal emotional thing to have to go through. And my friend who I was talking to about this, she was like, what are you talking about? No, it's fine. People do this all the time to each other. It's just life. You just carry on. And I was so perplexed by the different, like, she seemed to have a completely different orientation towards what infidelity was and what it means to me in my experience, and almost everybody I've ever met and witnessed go through this. There is such a vulnerability, such a rawness, an innocence that opens up in a really open, intimate relationship. There's this trust. And when there's infidelity, when that trust is broken, this innocent part, it's like it can just start spinning. It's like, what's happening? The world just got flipped upside down. And the shock of it and the pain of it can reach a very deep, tender place because there's so much openness. There's so much vulnerability right there. And I'm sure it's somewhat different for everybody that goes through it, but I think it's usually one of the more vulnerable things. The kind of trust we have there, the kind of openness that we open up in a romantic relationship. And I was so curious how my friend could be so different. So I asked her, I was like, have you ever been cheated on? And she said, no, I've never been cheated on. Not that I know of, at least. And I thought to myself, well, you may not know how it feels to walk through this fire until you've walked through this fire and felt the burn. And that got me thinking about one of the real gifts I got from that experience when I was 20 years old, which is I got to know what that fire feels like. And for the rest of my life since, I've been able to empathize with people going through that. And I can remember so many times somebody was just broken because of some trust issue or some infidelity that had happened in their love life. And I just immediately had this empathy and this openness and this caring because I'd walked through that fire. They say that vulnerability leads to empathy. And in this case, me experiencing something so vulnerable, so raw, so shattering, it created this empathy in its wake. It created an understanding and a humility that everybody's experience is different, but there's in the ashes of that suffering was this beautiful thing called empathy and experience. And I get to carry that. That's a gift. That's this treasure that I get out of that experience. And it makes me someone who can be more gracious and kind and supportive to others going through that. It's just, man, that's amazing. Such a beautiful thing. And I think that's probably one of the biggest gifts I got from that experience. Another one of the gifts I got, kind of a peripheral gift, maybe not, now that I think about it, is, like I said, I had that intuitive hunch. Like, when it happened, when there was that infidelity, I knew it. And that's a profound, like, I've had that experience in different ways, in different contexts throughout my love life. I believe that for myself and many others, if not most others, when I'm intimate with somebody, when I'm in an intimate relationship, it's like there's this emotional intermingling. Our energies become connected in a certain way, and I can feel when that connection is ruptured. And that connection is ruptured when someone's withholding something. That connection's ruptured when, there's certain things that cause it to feel disconnected or broken. And certainly infidelity would be one of them. And I think a lot of times people do know when it happens, and they might be afraid to talk about it because they feel like it might just be jealousy. In my case, I don't really gravitate towards jealousy in a big way. But if I feel those feelings, they will mess me up because there's this vulnerability that suddenly feels really shaky and unsafe and unclear on what's what. And several years later, I had another experience with a girlfriend where, I'd felt in the middle of the night, one night, sleeping by myself, I'd felt this like stabbing pain in my heart. And I actually talk about this in my book, How to Open the Heart. This story crosses into that big story. But I felt this deep kind of gut sense that something had happened with my girlfriend and another guy. And the next morning, I talked to her and I asked her, "What happened last night? Did something happen with you and another guy?" And she said, "No, nothing happened." And then I just couldn't let it go, and I just kept on asking and asking different ways. And then finally, she shared, "Okay, well, there was this guy on the dance floor, and we did grind pretty intensely. And yeah, it's probably something that you would, that I was going to withhold from you. And in this case, again, it was just like, oh, that was that feeling. It was actually connected to something. And it was cool just to talk it out. And, her and I, she was an awesome person. We had different kind of orientations or expectations in a relationship. And I don't hold anything against her or the person when I was 20. I think, we're all just people. We're all just figuring out how to be in relationships, how to feel these intense feelings, and how to be attracted to other people and what to do with that. But it's cool to recognize for myself the kind of intuitive hunches that I can feel, and to know that it's quite healthy to just talk about that and to learn how to differentiate between insecurity and jealousy and things that aren't, that are just concocted in the mind versus an actual feeling of connection that can break apart. And just talking about that openly and say, hey, what's going on? Can we just be honest about everything? Because honesty is the foundation of trust. Honesty is the king of feeling safe and connected in relationships. Making mistakes is almost like messing up is, fortunately, we can still have loving, trusting relationships and mess up. We have to be honest in order for that trust to flourish and grow, though. So it seems. That's my understanding. Anyhow, all of this is to say that going through that experience of being cheated on, I think it was really painful at the time, and now I feel like there was, in the wake of that was some really beautiful growth and learning and maturing as a person. It's not something I want to feel again, so if I can see it coming, hopefully I'll walk around that fire. And it's not something I want to put someone through. And there have been times where I haven't explicitly cheated, but I've probably emotionally cheated when I didn't understand the reality of that. And I certainly got out of one relationship and into another far too fast for the first relationship to settle and for that to kind of like heal properly for everyone involved. So I'm not perfect on this level. And like I said, the experiences I've gone through, the experience I had when I was 20, I'm not mad at that person. I don't blame that person. There was so much going on. It was youth, passion, and just figuring things out. And things can be messy along the way. They can hurt a lot at the time. But it often leads to something really beautiful. And that's another one of the profound lessons I got from that experience, is that I could feel like the world was ending and that love was gone. I wouldn't find it again. And life goes on. It really does. And that's an amazing awareness to have when I experience heartbreak throughout life, to know like, okay, whew, it just feels like the world got flipped upside down. And I know I've been through this. I know we just have to walk through this. I know that there's a process, there's grief, and that's not something that can be rushed or forced through. You can welcome it and you can foster it doing its magic, whatever that is. But yeah, after losing love, after experiencing infidelity, can feel, oh man, it can just feel like love is gone and the world is over. But life really does go on. And especially if we find the lessons in the experience we had, life can get a lot better, and we can find love in deeper ways than we ever knew before. That's been my experience. That's all I wanted to share today. I hope you enjoyed this. If you've had an experience on this level, if this sparked any thoughts for you that you want to share, go ahead and comment below. You can like this video, let me know you liked it. You can subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can turn on the notifications so you find out when new episodes come out. And if you want to check out my book, How to Open the Heart, you'll find info about that in the description below. And until next time, take care, everybody, and enjoy the days.